I did watch that video. You sent it out, right, Josh, on the new Army's commercial, or was that Luke?
Oh, I sent that out.
Luke sent that
Oh
out.
my, holy shit!
Oh, dude. Did you see the CIA's one though?
I watched probably
Yes,
the majority of the CIA, and I mean, once I got the gist, I was like, yeah, I'm done with that.
it was
Oh,
very.
that was so cringe. I don't know which one's more cringe. I would say the CIA one is, but you
The
put
CIA one
that
is.
one, that Army one in the context of Army, and it's like, oh man, who who you were in the recruiting command, Roger.
Yes.
Who
So
who thought that's a good idea? Because the demographic that they're going after, woke millennials, whatever, woke whatever they are, they're not going to join the army. You need to be
well,
going, you need to whatever. I don't know. Maybe I'm
it's
wrong.
the, you got to look at this because we used to always bitch, right? And I'm sure it's like everybody does it, but especially with the Army and recruiting, you sit there and as we would see the new campaigns roll out, we're like, this fucking sucks. Nobody's going to join for this. I don't want to do this. Da 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 da. And you got to remember, the Army is run like a business. So, like on the marketing side, they're like, "Hey, we're not trying to cater to you. You're already in the Army. We're trying to grab, people that are trying to join. Majority being 17 to 21 years old, or 22 years old, or whatever, and primarily under 25. So when you look like in my day, you had what they called Teams T as your motivators for people joining the Army: training, education, adventure, money, service to country, and travel. Those are the reasons why people join the Army. Our generation, that's why our folks join the Army, right?
Yep.
But when you look, I don't know what it is now, but I'm sure there's no Teams T anymore. There's probably a new, hey, these are the motivations now that people are they're looking for identity, they're looking for, cultural support or whatever it is. And so uh, I would tell you this. I mean, those when you look at recruiting command and accessions, I mean, they're great at what they do. So they've clearly got some marketing data there that, because like you said, when you look at today's, just my perception of what you, and looking at my kids and like their group of friends, I mean, there's just not a whole lot of the same motivators that for us that apply to them. So you say, okay, hey, how are you going to appeal to the woke crowd? How are you going to appeal to these guys and gals that, are tatted up and they like to smoke free, weed and freedom and this and that and art. So not as, I don't want to say not as patriotic, but, didn't grow up as like, I guess as much of a nationalist as as the rest of us did. So, it's different things that motivate them, man. I'm not a
I
big
thought
fan of the
I got
commercial at all, but
I got a little inside information on some of these. Some I'll put it to you this way. I got some inside information on some of these kind of crazy ads that we're seeing lately. And I was like, what is going on? And this person told me, he's like, at every level now, like not every level, but at the high levels of all these organizations, DOD, all of them, they have an in like the equivalent of an inclusivity EEO person who's like high ranking, like SES type level, who's
Mhm.
making sure that everything is, going all right. And that person, whoever it is basically they're not political appointees, but at the SES level in some of these organizations, they kind of are. And they are getting daily phone calls from the halls of Congress. How are things going there? Are things going all right? So this person or this office has a great deal of say on the public image of some of these organizations. It's the commissar. I think we talked about that on the podcast. It's the modern day commissar, man.
I was about to say we used to call those. I believe they call them block captains political
Yeah,
officers, commissars,
political
in the
officers.
old
Yeah,
Soviet Union. Yeah, yeah,
you have your
that's
well,
exactly what it is.
was
well,
it
like in
called a
recruiting
political
command,
officer?
we had quotas that would come down for specific races and ethnicities and genders and
Yeah,
this and that because ideally, and there is somebody that sits up there and crunches these numbers because ideally you want your military to be, a direct reflection as much as possible of, American society. So, you would get this push where, hey, for everybody, every person with a Hispanic background, that counts as two contracts or three
Hmm.
contracts or whatever to make a big
Well,
push for that, depending on where those numbers were that year.
you remember back in post 9/11, especially from like 2002. Well, just start at 2001, 2002. Into 2001 to maybe 2000 culture started coming around. The push was still diversity is our strength, right? It was. They were
Right.
starting to talk about it, but it was couched in a different context by commanders and the Army was pushing it down, and they were said, this is why diversity is our strength. You get multiple languages, you get different cultural experiences,
Right.
different, all this stuff. So it can help us be a more effective combat force, and they especially push the culture and language. It's like, we don't understand anything about Afghanistan. Why don't we have any Dari or Arabic speakers? Then it changed, man. And now you don't hear, it's just like, now diversity is just a strength by virtue of diversity, not by any measurable metric or anything like that. It's just like, well, diversity is good, so we're going to be stronger
Well, they've
because we
changed
have
it. They've changed it, and part of the thing that I wanted to talk about in the episode, if you notice, it's no longer diversity; it's inclusiveness, which are two totally different meanings, right? And you hit it on the head earlier a few weeks ago with the equity. I mean, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but I don't. I'm going to bring that up this episode because I don't think people realize that equity and equality are two totally different things, right? They sound the same, so that's good Democrat play. These sound very similar, so we just throw it out there. We'll conflate the two, and the next thing you know, it becomes equity, which is even stated in Biden's executive orders. And it's like, hey guys, gals,
it is.
This is a different ball game. And I tell you, with diversity and inclusiveness, same thing. Absolutely. When was the last time you heard the word diversity? It's all been inclusiveness.
That's true. And I think I'm looking it up real quick, but I think it's in the interim national security guidance. I think equity is mentioned more than once. And equity, well, we'll get into the episode. I mean, that's a good one. There's a lot to talk about, man. A lot's happened. And I mean, we didn't even address did we? The shooting of the girl who was charged at the other one with a knife?
No, we haven't talked about that.
And that's old news, man.
I'm about to say, dude, that's old. That's that's a month old now.
That's crazy that we didn't even touch on that.
It's been a busy week, dude. It's been a busy week.
A lot of bad shit came out all at one time.
That happened a month ago.
So
it's not that it's
let's kick this thing off. Who's doing the intro? Good job, Josh. Episode 57.
Do you want me to say episode 57 or just another episode?
Well, I would say between now and the next 30 seconds, if you kick it off, if you can remember the number 57, go ahead and throw out 57. If not, you can just say the next episode.
Nobody likes you, right? You know
Whatever.
That? God, you're fucking mean. This is why all you Asians are getting beat up. This is why all the Asian hate's happening. I don't know that I can protect. I don't know that I can protect you when you're being mean.
He's using the brought it on himself argument.
You bring it on yourself, man.
Yeah, it's my fault. Blame the victim. There you go. Well, you know what? If you didn't act that way, you wouldn't get your ass kicked.
I mean, that's true though. Some people get their ass kicked simply because they.
Well, they had the.
Right.
I don't know if it was local. I think it was local. Local or national news. So there was a young black guy, older white guy. I think they were at a convenience store or something like that. The older white guy throws out that racial slur, and I don't even know what he threw out. And then he gets punched in the face, and then he falls, hits his head, and he dies.
Yep.
So now you got this back and forth, and it's like, well, the black kid shouldn't have hit him in the face, and of course the white guy shouldn't have thrown out the racial slur. Well, if he hadn't have thrown out the racial slur, he wouldn't have got hit in the face. It's like, well, whose fault is it? Da 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 da.
I mean, they're both wrong, but I don't think, throwing out a racial slur deserves death. If we're going to use the whole, dealing drugs, you get shot by the cops in your car. Well, dealing drugs doesn't mean the cops should be able to kill you. Okay, well, saying whatever word doesn't mean you should die either. So which argument are we using?
Well, it goes back to what we talked about last time with I guess we should start this thing off because we're getting some good shit here.
All right. All right, everybody, welcome to episode 57 of the. Some of you have actually stuck around this long. See, I remembered, bitches. So, hey, thanks for that intro music. We definitely appreciate it. If you haven't already, you're behind, you're slacking, head over to www.carltonzeus.com, check it out, and you can find his music on Apple Music. All right, so it's been I don't know, man, it's been like a little over a week since we last all got together or something. I'm back home. I was repatriated and back released from captivity, so I'm back home, and it's actually kind of nice, man. This fuel shortage, all this fuel issue going on, Dude, I've been teleworking all week long, and just 45 minutes ago that I'm teleworking again tomorrow to save fuel. So, yeah, hey man, it's not terrible. It's a gorgeous day here. I'm waiting for our people, our yard folks, to come back and finish up our yard since they didn't work yesterday. It rained zero rain, and they aren't here working. So, but
Fascinating.
whatever. Yeah, whatever, man. All right, so we're just chatting about oh yeah, that guy that threw out the some racial slur and they got punched in the face. He's dead, and the kid who hit him is now is he being charged? Anybody heard?
I think he's going to be charged. So I think the gist of the story is, and again, I don't remember if it was local or because I know we follow each other a little bit on Facebook. So I forget if it's here in Phoenix or somewhere else. But I guess an older gentleman or an older guy threw out a racial slur at a young black guy. Young black guy punches him in the face. Guy falls back, hits his head, and then like a day or two later, 2 days later, he dies. And so now, there's obviously this back and forth with, well, whose fault is it? Well, obviously the guy shouldn't have thrown out the racial slur. And I don't even know what he said. I didn't hear it. I don't think I saw it in print, which obviously he shouldn't have done that. But, does that constitute a punch in the face? Well, then, the punch in the face was the intent to actually kill the guy? Was that piece, an accident? So I'm assuming the kid's going to be charged. But, it kind of goes back to what we talked about on the last episode with, when they talk about, and this here obviously isn't, directed at police, but they always talk about de-escalation, and de-escalation training, and even in the military we got that with de-escalation. And I don't think, at least in my opinion, I was having this talk with my boy, they're missing a critical piece. It's not a very holistic look, because to de-escalate means that it's already escalated. Okay, you're already there. So that's a separate piece in itself that you have to train on. But there is a very critical piece before then, to where you just don't get to that point. And I think, we don't discuss that. And I say we as a society, because the problem is when you talk about the actions prior to escalation, that reverts back to personal responsibility and upbringing. Okay, now obviously the old man, or I shouldn't say old, I don't even know. I think he's over 50, but he, clearly probably shouldn't have thrown out the racial slur or whatever it was. That would have obviously probably, that would have stopped the altercation or prevented it. But at the same time, the reaction from that kid, I've been called many racial slurs, and my first reaction is not to go punch somebody in the face. Because I think of second and third courses of action and orders of effect and what's going to happen here and there. And hey, am I really in danger? What do I care about this dick bag or whatever? So, I think that when you look at a lot of this stuff, and it's just really violence as a whole, and reactions, it's really de-escalation is phase 2. You haven't even touched phase 1 yet to say, okay, how do we address it from escalating it to begin with? And it just goes back to personal responsibility. So I don't know Luke, if you got anything else to say about that, but I know we were just kind of like hemming and hawing and threw that out there.
Yeah, I mean, that's I imagine if you took a poll in the US right now on not necessarily does it deserve death, but is it justified violence if you use this list of words? Again, words, does this justify physical violence? And I bet you that a good portion, probably more than you think, would say yes. Yes, if this person is called that, then whoever said the word deserves physical violence, or it's justified. It's justified. Of course, they deserve physical violence. Somebody throws out something at me, they deserve it. Now, is it justified if I do it? No, it never would be. It never would be. You got to think, okay, at what language, what type of language deserves physical violence? I mean, if somebody runs up to cops, how about this? Somebody runs up to a group of soldiers screaming, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. While with a just that. I mean, does that deserve a response? And Rogers, was hitting on, escalation, de-escalation. It's there are very few instances. I have to really imagine. I mean, you yell, "I have a bomb and I'm going to blow it up right now," and so somebody, the words themselves. I mean, you got to take the totality of the circumstance, but the words themselves, I don't feel like violence is justified by any bare words without context. The guy running up screaming Allahu Akbar, does he have his arms out with a smile on his face like he wants to hug the troops? God is great, thank God they're here. Or is he running with sweating and with the cord in his hand? It's not the words, it's the totality of circumstance. So yeah, I don't know, I wasn't expecting to talk about this tonight, but I think we learned, Josh, we all learned a little bit on avoiding violence, avoiding sudden violence. And that's a big part of it is de-escalation. Don't put yourself in the situation. I mean, anything to say about that?
It's pretty simple, So let's say, so my high school was about 80-20, maybe 85-15, and I was not the majority, right? So when people,
85% normal people.
yeah, yeah, and so when people called me cracker, lucky, and other racial, did I want to go fight them? Yeah, I wanted to. Did I? No, because I was smarter than that. Then as you get older, people say things to you. People are like, "What's up?"
All right, I'm
Dude,
sorry.
dude.
I'm sorry.
Do I want to do violence on them? Sure. Sometimes you look at people and you're like, man, that dude you got a really punchable face, and you didn't have your ass beat as a kid, and it shows. But is it justified? No, dude. Words, unless somebody is, it's like Luke said, it's the totality of it. If somebody comes in and is like, I am going murder you right now, and they have a bat, a knife, a gun, and they are sweating, menacing, okay, that's a different circumstance. But if somebody just walks in and is like, man, I hope you die, is that enough to is that justified to go beat the crap out of them? No. It's just the guy shouldn't have said it, the kid shouldn't have hit him. Truly, I think it's just as cut and dry and as easy as that. And what could have been a learning moment is now tragic.
Can I ask you another question?
Sure.
Can I ask you another question? So if you were 21 feet away, what's your favorite pistol to use? What's your favorite pistol?
Glock 19.
Okay, Glock 19. You have your Glock 19 unmartyized, and you are 21 feet away from let's just say, I'll just take, how about a butter knife suspended in midair? Okay, suspended on its own, like hanging from a string. If you had about 3 seconds to aim at that under perfect conditions, what do you think the odds are you'd hit it from 20 feet away? A butter knife.
Not good.
You could hit it. Perfect circumstances. If you were in practice, you've been going to the range and stuff like that. I don't know. I don't know if you know where I'm going with this, but maybe
Whatever you're going
you
with.
could answer. I'll kick it to Roger, see what he thinks.
I try to bring out the broader picture of this thing. One, Luke hit it on the head. I think through a lot of the stuff that we've gone through as far as our training is ultimately we just try to avoid violence because it's about making it through the next day, right? Okay, does this pose a threat to me, right? And if it doesn't pose a threat to me, and I can really go back and look at the last 10 years, 15, 20 years of my life outside of military specific things that we were doing and say, hey, have I been in situations where this actually posed a threat to me and where I felt in danger and I needed to react or whatever. And there's few and far between. But broader than that, it goes back to, I guess my whole point with this thing is a lot of this goes back to personal responsibility and what's being taught at home. I mean, a lot of this stuff, when you look at interactions with police officers, interactions with adults, with other folks, it's like what you're taught. And, my son, because of the group of people he hangs around and him being his age and this and that, they're real concerned with the police stuff and this and that. And it's funny because he always glosses over the racism piece as far as how it applies to us. And a couple of his friends are black, and especially out here where we live out in Phoenix, it's not a heavy population here. So, he does the right things, and he's trying to look out for his buddies and this and that. And he's like, hey, sometimes I see they're treated unfair, and the racism, da 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 da. And I try to bring that home a little bit and say, well, hey, have you ever looked at how it applies to us and how we react to those situations? And I brought this up several times, and it's kind of funny because it just hasn't quite hit home yet. Where he's like, what do you mean? I'm like, hey man, I'm half Asian. You don't think I grew up, especially some of the places I lived. I went to high school up in Chicago, did some time out in Kentucky. It's like, believe me, I was picked on by both sides, and a lot of racist comments came out. Nobody, that's kind of the norm. Does that mean that you go and try to beat everybody up and punch them in the face, or pull out a gun or whatever? Obviously not. There's other ways to deal with it. But I think the difference is my kids never grew up with that because we never made it about race. It wasn't like, hey, you're being picked on because of this, or, everything was merit based. It was always, and it kind of takes me back to, you remember back in the 80s, the big scare was like the Japanese and the schooling system, and the Japanese are going to kick our ass. And so that's like, and especially my mom being Korean, that's kind of the way we grew up. It's like, hey man, you need to be ready to go out there and eat everybody else's kids. You got to be number one. You got to kick ass, and everything was merit based. It's all based on your performance. And that's kind of how we raised our kids. And race was never brought up as a reason or as an excuse or a way to get ahead or a reason why you're behind. And it's not even when you look at trying to get ahead and using your race to get ahead, what's worse about it is people are using race as a reason for failing. And people are using race as a reason for being behind. And this is actually a pretty good transition because before the actual podcast piece here for the YouTube viewers, they'll see some of it. But we were talking about how the left is starting to conflate words and really change the meanings of a lot of things. And we were looking at, a couple of them that we threw out. And Luke mentioned this several episodes ago. He kind of glossed over it, equality versus equity. The one that we were just talking about right now was, and I just pulled this up, was diversity versus inclusion. So when we were all young Joes in the Army, it was all about diversity. And Luke, I mean, you brought up a good example where it's like, hey, once we started going, when you look after 9/11 and we started going to Afghanistan and Iraq and these other places, it's like, hey, we don't have folks that speak Pashto. We don't have folks that know a lot about this culture and this and that, and we needed that, and that's where the diversity piece comes in, right? Because diversity truly makes you stronger. So I just pulled this up, and it was the first thing that I gurgled: diversity versus inclusion. Diversity refers to the traits and characteristics that make people unique, while inclusion refers to the behaviors and social norms that ensure people feel welcome. Okay, and the problem with that is they're totally separate words with totally separate meanings, which will give you different outcomes. But the left and the progressives have conflated the two to mean the same. And so when you hear it, we were just talking about this now. It's like, when was the last time we've heard diversity? I haven't heard diversity since I got out of the Army. It's all been shifted to inclusion. The other example that we use, and I'll throw it to you for your thoughts on this, Luke, is, the equality versus equity, the one that you brought up several weeks ago. Equality versus equity, it sounds the same. Equal, right? You see, equal, almost equal there. So it's all the same. So we have gone from equality to equity, which I think you brought up was in the a couple of his executive orders. It's like his first or second executive order that he mentions equity. And there's a big difference in the two, because when you look at equality means having the same opportunities, having the same resources. Okay, when you look at a timeline or a string, equality is making sure everybody starts out at the same place on the string and the string is flat for everybody. Okay, equity, on the other hand, talks about the other end of the string and says, well, regardless of what you had, everybody should end up the same. Fair. And I'm using the quotes, air quotes here. What is considered fair? And so it doesn't matter that with the three of us, I may have worked my ass off and I may have done the right things by, going to community college and working 3 jobs to put myself through school to get my degree, da-da-da-da-da. Luke may have graduated with a 4-year degree and $50,000 in student loan debt. But what's fair is that he should be at the same endpoint that I should be at, which is a degree with no debt and this and that. So what they do is, as opposed to raising everybody up, you end up taking your top performers and you end up bringing them down, right? To make that, it's basically an average is what you're trying to do. You're just trying to make everybody average. So, it's very, very dangerous with everything that's going on out there now. It's very dangerous how they use these subtle shifts in words that they're using, out there to the public, and even with the media picking it up. And you're starting to see it in our actual policy, right? In actual federal guidance and federal policies. So you see these subtle shifts, and I would tell you, go back and look. I mean, when was the last time you really saw the big push on diversity? When was the last time you saw the big push on equality? It's all been equity in the last at least year, and I would probably say the last 2 or 3 years. What do you think, Luke?
Yeah, it sounds like somebody's been reading some Ayn Rand. Is what it sounds like to me. I don't know.
Oh, that was months ago. That was months. I still haven't given my book review on white fragility. I've still got my notes from that.
That'll be great. We'll cover that down the road, which I'm seeing a little backlash from even on the in the media. But to address your question, equity versus equality, not question, but your comments. It can be summed up, and the real conservative folks who listen to this show, which I guarantee 99% are, know the old phrase equality of opportunity versus equality of outcome. And when you get, and my dog picks now. Can y'all hear that? Listen real close, audience. My dog picks now when it's my turn to talk to lap up the water. Unbelievable. So equality of opportunity versus equality of outcome. Equality, when we're saying the word with the term equality here, when Roger is opportunity, everybody strive for. Everyone has the same opportunity to achieve and pursue the happiness and all that stuff. Which in the Constitution, by the way, it's the pursuit of happiness that's guaranteed, not happiness. Equality of outcome is equity. And that's exactly what Roger was saying. I mean, it doesn't matter what you accomplish, everyone's going to end up with the same, utopian way of life, no matter what you did to get there. Everyone has the same end. So, yeah, I think it's interesting, in the interim national security guidance, equity is mentioned 4 times. Equity is mentioned 4 times. Inclusivity is only mentioned once, and 1 time in the same sentence as equity. But it's absolutely amazing to me. And I think I was reading something or I was watching some program, and somebody was making a comment. Let's see if I can encapsulate what they were saying and make it understandable. Is now we've got a balance between pursuing our national interests and pursuing our national values. Those 2 things can kind of be seen at odds right now. And it's a question. It's a question that's being asked within the government. Do we pursue our national interests or our national values? And when I heard and saw this, I was like, what are you even talking about? The values of this nation are encapsulated, or should be, in our national interest. That's it. So you pursue the national interest, and you pursue the national interest because our values are encapsulated in that, and that's where we're going as a people. And I think we're in a transitional time where we're asking the question, okay, and the interim national security guidance kind of is paving the way toward where we're going. It's like, well, these values you're talking about in the security guidance don't really line up with the national interest. So which one do we change? And I think we're on a path right now where we're going to change our national to reflect a different values than we had 20, 30 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago. So I think it's a real interesting time. It's equity is now being codified, and we're going down the road. Equity, the pursuit of equality of outcome is communism. That's all it is. It's not even socialism. It's straight up communism. We know how much, Josh, you love communists.
All a helicopter ride, one way ticket. So notice, so you were talking about, the dumbing down. So in February, Boston Public moved their advanced work classes program. So it's basically, how, but schools have the advanced placement. Well, they removed the program. Why? Because they took a look and it found that 70% of the kids in the program were white or Asian, even though Blacks and Hispanics make up a large portion of, the population in Boston public schools. So instead of figuring out, okay, why Hispanic kids not scoring well on, these entrance exams to get into the advanced placement classes and correcting that problem, we're just going to take the problem, we're just going to remove the program from the school, and that way nobody gets to be, because that's equity, right?
Everybody's equal.
Everybody.
Yeah.
It's just,
Hey, you can't say it's not, if that's perceived as a problem, you can't say they didn't come up with a solution.
yeah, I mean, you know what? Hey, here's the solution. If everybody can't be advanced, if everybody can't be gifted, no one will be gifted. We're just going to go ahead and dumb it down. And so, I mean, they even interviewed some of the kids that wanted to get in the program. They asked them, what do they do now? This sixth grader, a sixth grader, think about the mindset and, the lack of development in that prefrontal cortex. And when the sixth grader goes, well, why should I work hard now? Huge. When a sixth grader says, well, if everybody's going to get the same grade, if everybody's in the same class, why should I work hard? Look, man, even kids have figured this out. Even kids know this is bullshit. And you go back. So, a homework assignment for all our listeners out there. I want you to pull up resistance pyramid. All right, so U.S. Army John F. Kennedy Special Warfare Center obviously specializes in unconventional warfare. I want you to Google and take a look at the SOAR resistance pyramid, and it will take you through the different levels of resistance in society. And you can see what is happening everywhere. And so, when you look at the pyramid, it's not a waterfall, kind of process, right? You got to do step one to get to complete step two to get step three. Think of it like an OODA loop process. It's constantly churning. It's constantly churning, and all don't have to be complete. There's a little bit from each step going on right now, and you can see it. You can see it in the news. You can see it everywhere. You can see it in the policies and the ideology of Biden and Harris. You can see it in the policies and the ideology of AOC, the Omars, the Tlaibs, all your favorite Democratic names in there. And this is what's happening. And people are too busy, putting gas in plastic grocery bags because God heaven help us. You guys seen those pictures? It's absolutely insane. It is. But that's what's happening right now. Like there's a no shit textbook resistance in the United States, and the left has been doing this. This didn't start in the last couple of years. This started a couple of decades ago. Nobody was paying attention. Nobody was paying attention because, it was, well, if I come out and say something against affirmative action, that's going to make me a racist. And I don't want to be called a racist, so I'm not going to say anything. Affirmative action's good, right? I mean, it feels good. It's one of those laws, it feels good. It doesn't do good, but it feels good. So I'm going to vote for it. I'm going to vote for those who, are. And nobody's on. It's just that slow, Luke loves to say it all the time, insidious. Very slow. You're not even going to notice a change until it's too late. But everybody go take a look at that. Read up on it. Get smart on it. I've been trying to get smart on it the last couple of months. And, some on there. So you look at the pyramid and it's one of those part of it. They say, hey, this happens, in a clandestine manner, when it talks about propaganda and all that stuff. You can throw that out the window because it's not happening in a clandestine manner. It is happening overtly. But it's all, man, it's all on the World Wide Web. Anybody can go in and take a look at some of this stuff. Take a look at that. It's happening right in front of our eyes. Very, very few people are paying attention. So yeah, that's all I got to say about.
And COVID probably sped that up, right? I mean, I think you see it with the gasoline thing, and especially where some folks that we know where they work in some very special organizations that have literally just shut down. They just hunkered down. I mean, when you look at what happened with the whole toilet paper thing during COVID, that was just, I don't want to say it was the dry run, but that was just like, hey, we're just inching forward. Okay, you saw how, crazy people went over toilet paper. Now you've got gas. And what worries me is it's not those specific little instances, but it's become that is the knee jerk reaction for anything that happens now. It's not to get up and fight, right? It's not to push back. It's not to, hey, we need to adapt and overcome and find other ways. It's I'm hunkering down, I'm staying home, and I'm waiting for my STEMI check. I mean, that's what it is. It's dependent on the government. And I think that that's the bigger problem that we're seeing, because it makes you wonder, hey, is that going to be the reaction for every crisis that comes forward? Is just to hunker down and wait for the government to come help? I mean, that's the scary part about it. Now, and I know some folks, because we have 328 million Americans here. And so you're going to have some folks that automatically do that, and you're going to have a percentage that fight and resist and this and that, no matter what the issue is, or what the cases are. But when you have some very specific special organizations that this is their knee-jerk reaction, that is scary as hell. And, it takes me back to, like, I always applaud the you always have like the devil's advocate, or that type of thing, and it's the somebody's just trying to nitpick, and I'm always just going to throw out the negative. I'm always going to throw out the what if, and I do like resistance to an extent, because you do need to challenge assumptions. So I want to give Cuomo credit, because when he did his interview with the CDC director, like I said, he was teeing everything up with her, and you guys are being too safe, which is good. You're being too good at your job, and we're overly safe. And so he's teeing all that up. But he asks her, hey, if folks are vaccinated and you're outside, why are we still wearing masks? Why is the guidance to continue to wear masks? And her answer was scary as hell to me. And I don't think people caught it, and even Cuomo, he did catch it. He just didn't follow up on it, which is, I think, the difference between the left and the right, depending on which agenda you're pushing. But she was like, well, because we do not have the studies that show that vaccinated people who may be asymptomatic are not passing the virus. Listen to that closely out there. All right. So then Cuomo follows up. Okay, and I'll summarize some of this stuff, but he follows up like, so do you have the studies that show that they are passing the virus, that they are infecting others? And her answer was, well, no, but there are some research papers coming. That's dangerous, right? It's not you're not proving the positive, you're trying to prove the negative. It's not hey, look, we've got studies that show, because, they came out with that whole 10% thing, and it turned out to be, it's not actually 10%. You have a 1% chance. And even if with the 1% chance, the chances of you going to the hospital are 0.03. And, oh, by the way, the chances if you go to the hospital of dying are 0. Okay, if you've been vaccinated. So the CDC director is not coming back saying, hey, we've got these studies that show out of 100,000 people, 50,000 of them catch corona from being next to other folks outside, right? I mean, that's what you want to see. It's like, okay, that makes sense to me. Give your guidance, whatever. They're like, well, no, we don't have anything that proves that you can't catch it. So because we don't have anything that proves that you can't catch it, or that you can't spread it, well, we just need to wait and hold fast. So, I want to throw it to you, Luke, for you actually had a pretty good example you threw out there earlier with the shark thing. I think I read that. You remember what it was?
Basically, you kind of encapsulated, well, is there a risk? Yeah. But when you start like applying the data to the risk, they're using misleading numbers is what they're doing. Because when you apply the data to the risk is just minuscule. So the example I saw, and it was kind of they were talking about logic. It's like it's you throw out some numbers, and people get the wrong idea about it. For example, if I told you and the audience right now that there are less than 20,000 shark attacks on human beings every year in the world, there's less than 20,000. Now, if I told you that just before you went to the beach, you'd be like, oh, 20,000, that's a lot. You'd think 20,000. That's what you'd think.
Right.
But now what I said is true. Okay. It's true. There are less than 20,000 shark attacks per year. But if you go down the premises to get to that conclusion, what you'll find is, yes, the conclusion is true. But the argument to get to the conclusion with the premises are all messed up, because there are only 150 shark attacks per year. So I can't remember if that means the argument's not cogent or not sound, but the argument, what they're using to construct that, it's misleading, and you're using premises to a true conclusion, and that's just it's like when I read that, I was like, it's just unbelievable. And we joke with each other about, it's really hard not to be a black helicopter guy. I mean, it's really hard because I know, the simplest explanation, Occam's razor, that's close to the truth. But man, what we've seen over the past year, and we continue to see, we were paying really close attention. I think Josh actually, in our little chat that we keep going pretty much all of our waking hours, he threw out there, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, and more fuel to the fire. And the article was about how this was 3 weeks ago, how there were going to be fuel shortages because of a shortage of trucks or truck drivers or something like that. That was 3 weeks ago that the media was putting that out. 3 weeks ago. We can look that up. And now all of a sudden, because of other issues, there's a fuel shortage with the pipeline. There either is or isn't. Depends. But I'd like to touch on going off the rails from what Roger asked me there. I don't think I did. I think I kind of stuck to it. But we said a few weeks ago, we're talking about the infrastructure bill and all this stuff, and I said I'm always suspicious when I hear the words crumbling infrastructure. When politicians say crumbling infrastructure, I'm like, oh boy, how much is this going to cost us? But I think because that pipeline, some group from Russia hacked in and ransomwared their servers or whatever they did. Does that mean that the infrastructure is crumbling? And that got out. Now there's lines in North Carolina, and 40% of the gas stations are closed. Does that mean the infrastructure is crumbling? To me, it shows how fragile the infrastructure is, because I mean, most of those tanks, the tanks that hold all the gas at all the gas stations, those things are huge and they hold a lot of gas. So because the pipeline was shut down on a Friday, you come to the next, already there's lines. I mean, that's just because everybody not necessarily panicked, but they saw their tank and they're like, you know what, I might better go get some gas, and everybody went at the same time. What this situation shows me is that our, gasoline situation, gasoline and diesel, can't support everyone going to get gas at the same time. It can't support it, without a steady supply coming through those pipelines. And there's a lot to unpack with this situation. I mean, I don't know how long we want to stay on it, but Josh is right there. I mean, even over here where I am, gas prices jumped. Not a lot.
Well, Josh is fake news,
but they went up.
because New York Times said there are no lines. They tweeted, right? They came out and said, hey, contrary to what you guys are seeing and observing, there are no lines at the gas pumps.
Okay, so they took that real quick, Josh. They took that. New York Times took it out of their print edition. They took it out of their print edition, but they kept it in the online, all their online articles. I thought that was interesting. Sorry. But Josh is right there in the belly of the beast. So go ahead, Josh.
No, back to your shark attack, thing. So at some gas, New York Times is correct. There are no lines for gas at certain gas stations
In Iowa.
No, here. Why? Because there's no gas. The gas pumps are closed. So they're correct. There is no line at the gas station at some of them because there is no gas to be had. They got the little yellow baggies over the pump handles. It's like no gas. So yeah, there's not a line there
and it's like 50%. I think I saw this morning, like North Carolina was like 50% didn't have gas.
Dude, no more. So ABC 11, Raleigh, and this is an ABC affiliate. This is not Fox News. This is not Breitbart. This is not Ben Shapiro out there. This is ABC. 71% of the gas stations in North Carolina, gas. 47% of the gas stations in DC, no gas. Florida, 31%. Georgia, 49%. And Virginia, 55%. Now, think about that. And it's not, so the whole gas thing, everybody went crazy. Everybody went at one time. And those, you're right, those tanks, those underground tanks at the gas station, they're fairly large. They hold a large amount of fuel, but those things get fuel every other day. So, that's why people, it's what normally you never see those things run dry because, they're getting supplied every other day. You're not going to get gas every other day. Hopefully not, unless you're driving a big Tonka truck or something.
I need one of those like Fox News, wah wah wah. But it's we got some breaking news. So clearly the CDC, because they're tied in with the Chinese, are listening to the recording of our podcast. So released 1 minute ago, CDC to ease indoor mask guidance. So basically, they are expected. The new guidance will say that fully vaccinated people can safely stop wearing masks inside most places. Sorry, I know I totally cut you off, but that it was breaking news, and I know by the time we get this out there, it'll be old news. But as of right now, it's breaking news, and C3 was on it first. Just saying.
That's right. There you go. If we had a website, we could put it on there right now. So, as far as gas goes, and it doesn't matter. So, I think this shows. I don't think this shows that our fragile our gas stations. I think it shows how far our supply chain is. Our supply chain is dog shit. Like our supply chain is 100% complete dog shit. We saw it last year with.
Wait, okay. If everything is running smoothly, it's not dog shit. It works very efficiently in a very narrow set of circumstances, or a narrow set of circumstances. Because, dude, grocery stores are stocked. In normal circumstances, the supply chain in normal circumstances works okay.
But it's fragile. I mean, my China, my fine china works great when I take it out of the shelf. I wipe it off and I put food on it, set it on the table. It works fantastic. Yeah. But the second I into a million pieces, and it doesn't, and you got to put Humpty Dumpty back together again. If it can't take any before it breaks down, it's fragile and it's dog shit.
Right, but it's not meant to withstand anything like that. I mean, you got to remember the supply chain over the last 20 years has been built extremely lean. And so when you look at, the way the supply chain works, they want to be lean, it's profitable, and they don't mind the stress. They truly don't, because what stress is going to do is drive up the demand, drive up the cost, drive up the profits. And so they operate that way. Again, you talk about the black helicopters. They operate that way for a reason. One, because obviously, it puts more money in their pocket today. And two, when that stress finally does happen and it does actually break, everything goes up. It goes through the roof. I mean, when you look at your your disasters over the last several years. I mean, look at the profits, like with oil. I mean, you remember the whole gas thing? I mean, look at what there were years there where they were bringing in record profits, for like an entire year. So I don't disagree with you. I'm just saying I think it's done that way intentionally.
By design or not, it's fragile and it's dog shit. If you can't layer any level of stress, you're living in a house of cards, and little breeze that comes, let's say China can shut it all down. That's not good. That's not where you want to be. That's not where you want to be with your oil. It's not where you want to be with any type of goods. Last year we saw it with fucking toilet paper and, chicken.
This is a tough one though, man.
This
is a tough one because how else is it? I mean, I'm sitting here trying to think of a supply chain in history that could, that was comparable on scale. Like you have to scale it way down. That was comparable to what we have now. You'd have to talk to an economist or a supply chain expert, logistics expert, but I don't know if it's possible to build a supply chain like the one we have now and like secure it completely, because that would be so incredibly prohibitively expensive to actually secure it. Look, I'm not saying you're wrong, Josh. I agree with you completely. But I'm just wondering, is it even possible to build a supply chain? Just take food, grocery stores, fresh food, fresh meat, fresh produce, bread. I mean, is it possible to build a supply chain to where it could withstand, a cataclysmic event, even in a certain area. If you did build it like that, the items would be prohibitively expensive because you would have spent too much on the supply chain.
Well, no, you can. The problem is what we're looking at here is we're looking at an isolated incident, right, with the Colonial Pipeline. And I had this conversation yesterday. It wasn't just the Colonial Pipeline. Let's go back and let's look at other actions that happened, i.e., Keystone Pipeline, right? I.e., the ban on, and this goes beyond Biden here. This goes a decade in the past, 2 decades in the past, but the renewed ban on drilling and all that stuff on federal land. So it's like, hey, you talk about stress. Okay, there was a stress. Keystone Pipeline was a stress, a small stress, right? The ban on the pipeline is a stress. When you look at the winters and what happened in Texas, that's a stress. And then finally, you get to a breaking point with the Colonial Pipeline incident, and then it finally just breaks. So I mean, there have been stresses there, right? And Luke just typed up build redundancies. It's not just redundancies; it's diversification, right? I'm gonna use that term, diversify, because if you have several different lines of efforts that are coming in, you can lose one. You can sustain a stress here and there. But hey, when the federal government's like, hey, we're going to shut this down, when the federal government's making policies to say, hey, we can't drill for oil here, when the federal government's saying, well, you know what, we're no longer going to pressure OPEC to increase their output, and then something like this happens, those aren't 4 or 5 small isolated incidents. Those are major and they are significant. And when you wrap them all together, and I would tell you, it is a snapshot. That right there is the epitome of this administration. Okay, it's the epitome of this administration because it goes hand in hand. I'm totally jumping around, but Josh, it goes hand in hand with the immigration, right? The immigration isn't just Biden coming in saying, "Hey, I'm going to welcome illegal immigrants." Okay, it goes all the way back to what they call the bilateral, the BLAs and the BAs with the big three down in Central America, right? That hey, when Trump was in office, he said, by the way, if you want your money, yeah, you're going to start keeping your people inside your country. You want your $500 million? You're going to start preventing your folks from coming to the United States. On top of building the wall. On top of, by the way, you can seek your asylum, but you're not going to do it here. You're going to go back to you're going to go back to your country. You're going to go back across the border. But when you get rid of all of those, you just scrap all of it. Well, now you have another crisis at the border, right? So I know we totally hijacked Josh's thing. I'll throw it back to him. Sorry.
No, it's okay. All I was going to say is that hack, not a cataclysmic event,
No.
right?
No.
No, nothing's going to withstand a cataclysmic event. Okay. I mean, that's like, that's a Cat 5 hurricane coming through. That's a nuclear bomb going off in the middle of your city. Yeah, it's probably new to withstand that. But one company getting hacked, and the next thing, a lot of this is because Karen and Chad don't know how to take care of themselves. They have 2 modes. They're either on cruise control, or they go into berserker mode when something goes wrong and they go buy up all the toilet paper. But dude, this should not have even been a blip on the radar. Like, okay, so a company got hacked. It happens every day. But one company gets hacked, and one pipeline gets shut down. And look what it caused. That's garbage. That is absolute garbage. So go back so let's talk to tank farms, right? And I'm not, an oil industry, logistical expert, but this shit gets trucked from the refineries or brought through pipelines to tank farms, fuel stored at tank farms, whether it's just regular oil, whether it's diesel. Gas, MoGas as we call it, and then it gets put onto the different trucks, and the trucks take it out to its various consumers, i.e. your local gas station. Do you know tank farms aren't kept at full capacity?
I believe that.
So those big tanks use full capacity. A lot of those tanks are empty. You know why? Because government regulation won't let them. They won't let them be full. And granted, some of it they don't want. Again, you don't want a tank farm, full of MoGas in the middle of your neighborhood when, tosses out there soon to be banned menthol Newport and, sets all that bomb in the middle of your neighborhood. But why? Dude, if those tank farms are full, guess what? Guess what is not an issue? An oil company, a pipeline getting shut down. It's not an issue. Okay, it'll be back online, and Joe the truck driver keeps bringing your fuel to your local gas station, and everything is cool. Just think about how many work hours have been lost this week because people didn't go to work because they didn't have a car. Just it's just I don't know, man. I think our supply chain. I think it could be vastly improved. I think it's too fragile.
Well,
It needs to be worked on. It needs to be hardened in places where it can be.
this reminds me, this whole conversation reminds me of one of my Wikipedia ventures I'll go on when I'm bored on a Saturday afternoon. I'll look up, hey, whatever. I'll type in apple, like just the apple, like the fruit. And I'll be like, oh, read about apples. Where's the biggest apple on something? And I'll click on something, and the next thing you know, I'm looking at supply chain, logistics, and national, and the strategic importance of them. It's just going down that Wikipedia rabbit hole. But yeah, this is a really good discussion. You got three guys who are not experts on supply chain logistics talking about it. But yeah, what's fascinating. You talk about the tank farms there, Josh. The historically the petroleum, our oil reserves, our oil strategic reserves. That's a weird thing. Look into what our strategic reserves, like what that means. It means oil. Basically, last time I looked, it means oil we're not pumping out of the ground. We have capped wells, and we're using that as a strategic reserve, and we will uncap those wells, and whatever in the case of a national emergency or a war or whatever. But to the tank farms, and I'm again, our folks listening down in San Antonio, which is quite a few of y'all, a lot of them have a lot of experience in the oil fields and in the oil industry. So I'd be interested if they'd give us some feedback. But is it possible to go ahead and refine certain certain petroleum products and store them as you don't even have to call it a strategic reserve. Well, call it a strategic reserve, and then attach certain guidelines on when and how that will be used. If as state of emergency is declared, we can tap the strategic reserve or whatever. I don't think we're there with this Colonial Pipeline, where it's a national emergency, whatever. I don't think we're there. A few people are going to miss out on work, and that's it's just the weirdest thing. But there's enough pipelines underneath the ground in the United States to go to the moon and back 2 or 3 times. I think it's 3 times. That's how many miles of pipeline there are in the United States, and that includes everything, going to all the gas stations and everything. People always like, well, I hardly ever see trucks filling up those tanks at the gas stations, because nowadays many of these gas stations are hooked directly to a line, this network of lines, and they a lot of them automatically fill up, especially in Texas. I know that's the way it is in Texas. It's absolutely amazing. And Roger, I want to touch on something you said about the immigration thing, and then kick it back to you to go to our next topic, whatever that'll be. But I think we said early on in our first few episodes, I think we talked about immigration a little bit. We touched on it, and I think I said something, or maybe it was one of you guys, along the lines of, hey, we need to address the root causes of why this is happening. And, why do so many El Salvadorans, Nicaraguans, Guatemalans, why are they trying so desperately to come to the United States? And then do the why game that we talked about. Why is that? Well, why is that? Why is that? Well, the Biden administration, they came out and said, well, we'll just throw money at the problem. And they were actually rebuffed, especially by El Salvador. They're like, that will not solve the issue. And El Salvador put something out there that was very interesting. I'm like, that's what I'm talking about. This is what we need to be doing. El Salvador, and they put, I think it was their minister of, is some minister in El Salvador, a government official, came out and said, throwing money at the issue, for welfare here is not the problem. We can take care of ourselves. We don't need, you to throw money at it. What we need is for some sort of trade deal that said if the United States would import only 1% of its coffee from El Salvador, we have a plan to solve all our problems. 1%. of the U.S. coffee supply come from El Salvador, and he had worked it all out. And there's a lot of problems with that, as Josh and I know, having been down there. I mean, there's just a ton of corruption, and in the end, it probably wouldn't work. On paper it would work, but you'd have to get rid of the corruption first, and that's a problem you'd have to address. But let's come up with like solutions that you're not just throwing money at the problem like we've been doing for the past year with this whole COVID shutdown and all this stuff that's causing, for me, noticeable inflation. Like we covered a few episodes ago. I was back and I was like, man, groceries seem more expensive now. And I was asking you guys about it, and you're like, no, it seems about the same. But to me, I swear, it seemed more expensive. And I think the proof's in the pudding with the consumer price index numbers that came out for March, April. I don't know if you want to transition on that, Roger, or if you've got something else.
No, I do want to follow up real quick on the border thing, because you're absolutely right. It does take a holistic approach, but I think whether it's money, whether it's building a factory down there, whether it's importing something, I mean, there's a lot of different solutions. Some of them are probably better than others, and I don't think any of us have the end-all, be-all answer, and I think it's more than just one solution. My problem with what's going on, and it's not just this administration, but this is the big difference between the last one and this one doesn't even address it as an issue, right? They don't even see, or at least publicly, what they are putting out there is they don't even address it as an issue. President hasn't been down there. Your border czar hasn't even been down there. Did you see the pictures that they were talking about last week where, so you had I forget where the place was. I don't know if it was Del Rio or wherever the heck it was, where they had, I think we actually used a copy of it on one of our cover arts, but they had the picture of the kids in the, facility and all packed in. And so the government turned around and said, hey, look, here's the same room and it's empty. Right? There's nobody in there. And then what was it? Like, I think it was a Democrat that came out and said, yeah, because you moved them next door. Here's a picture of the HHS building next door where you really, dude, I mean, you can't make this stuff up. You literally said, okay, oh, well, it goes back to Josh's thing where there's no lines at the gas station. Yeah, because you're out of gas. Oh, wait a minute. Here's the picture with a bunch of kids in cages. So let's just move the kids and we'll take that picture again. And we'll say, hey, man, they're not in cages. Well, no, they still are. They're just next door. They're not here. And that's my problem with the Biden administration. I actually have no issues with politicians trying things and just not working and saying, hey, this kind of sucked. Let's scrap it. Let's try something else. Right. I have no issues with that. And I have an appetite for that. The problem that I have is when you don't even address it as an issue, like it's nothing like with the fuel thing. There's no fuel issue. Well, you know what? There's probably about 50 million Americans out there that believe that it is an issue. And I would say that the lines, no matter how many photos the New York Times publishes and posts, hey, there are lines at the gas stations that have gas in them. That's the reality of it, is they're just not addressing the issues. And I think Josh just typed up, yeah, Biden just restarted the wall. And and that's my problem with a lot of the politicians is, hey, good on them, restarting the wall. Okay. It's a symbolic piece that won't be covered by the news anywhere on the left. And me personally, and maybe I'm not the guy he's going to convince because I'll never vote for him. So maybe it just doesn't matter what I think, but I would actually appreciate for the politician to come out of the president and say, hey, look, we had this idea. We obviously see that there's a surge at the border. It's clearly a direct reflection of what our policies are at this time. We do know that this worked in the past, so this is what we're going to do. The wall makes sense. We're going to reinstate this thing. Let's start rebuilding it or whatever. I don't have a problem. If anything, you'd gain some of my respect. But hey, you know what? At least you're kind of trying to solve things. You're trying to move things forward. But this administration doesn't do that. Back to Luke's question, and this is probably more of a Josh thing. I mean, when you look at CPI, when you look inflation, and Josh loves this topic with inflation, the deficit, and the debt. Here's what's crazy. It was like 2 weeks ago when the Fed chairman was coming out like every single day, inflation's not an issue. Inflation's not an issue. Inflation's not an issue. 2 days ago, guess what? Inflation is an issue, right? And it again, you tie it back to everything else. Border's not a problem. You've got all these little, and I hate to use the term crisis because not everything's a crisis, but they're not even identifying them or addressing them publicly as a problem or as an issue. Hey, we really need to check this stuff here. We're not there yet, but there are some levels of concern here because what they're worried about is the only thing that's keeping the Biden administration, his head above water right now is the stock market had been up for quite a while. The Dow hit new record highs, the Nasdaq took a beating, but the Nasdaq, the excuses are coming out. The Nasdaq took a beating. The general consensus was, well, a lot of blue chip, a lot of old school stocks on the Dow, they're getting back up to their peak. So people were selling their profits on the Nasdaq to get back into the old school 3Ms, on the Dow Jones Index. So, I mean, it kind of sounds like a little bit of an excuse to me, but whatever, it is what it is. But it's, the stock market was really the only thing that, was keeping his head above water on. He could point to that and say, hey, market's up, because even though it's not a broad indicator of the market or the economy, rather, I think most Americans look at that and say, okay, that's a broad indicator of how the economy is doing. Along with the CPI, let's look at the jobs report. So the jobs report was estimated to be 916,000 jobs. Okay, new jobs created. Do you guys see what the actual number was? It was revised down
200 something thousand.
Yeah. It was revised down to 700 and some odd thousand, and the actual number was 266,000. That's crushing. Okay. We're not talking about just missing it by 100, or 100,000 or 50,000 or whatever. That's crushing. And you go back and
here's something that's not measured though, Roger. It's not measured, I don't think, by in this number. And real quick, is that there are approximately 8.1 million full-time jobs available. It's not measured by the government, but we only filled 266,000 of them. Unbelievable.
Yeah, and they asked President Biden. They said, "Hey, do you think the economic impact stimulus money or whatever it was, the extra COVID unemployment money, is that hurting, folks going back to to their jobs, right? They're staying. Bottom line is, hey, if you're going to pay me $4,000 a month to stay at home, and I'm only going to make $2,800 a month if I go back to work, guess what? I'm staying home." And he came back with like, we don't see any measurable, indicators that that's even happening. I'm like, really? I mean, do you, that's the thing. It's like, it's just right out there you're starting to see a little bit of a turn, but the majority of these old school reporters or journalists, quote unquote, activists, I guess we should say, aren't even following up on that. It goes back to, and I'll throw it to Josh for a CPI thing, but it goes back to like his Amtrak story. I sat there and watched Biden's Amtrak story, and that was painful. One, and I do try to be like extremely fair. I try to be objective. I want to hear what he's saying. He's the president of the United States. All right. I want to hear what he's got to say, what he's got to say. And I try to listen, and maybe the C3 listeners say the same thing about us three, but that dude is hard to follow, man. Like sometimes I don't know what the hell he's saying. But he's talking, long story short, with this Amtrak thing is like, they came out with a story that I just hit 1,000,000 miles in Air Force One, and I went to whatever the guy's name was, the conductor, and I used to go home every weekend because my mom was sick, and back when I was the vice president, and he's like, Joe, you need to you've done 1.5 million miles on Amtrak, and and that should be the real story. And Joe's like, yeah, I think I'd trust that conductor more than I'd trust these folks over here keeping tallies on Air Force One. Yeah, so that conductor retired in 1993. Blatant lie, right? When they showed that when his mom passed away, and I'm not trying to pick on his mom or anything, but I think she passed away like maybe 2010 or something like that. I forget what it was, but it was very, very early on. It's like, so yeah, you actually didn't come home a lot throughout your vice presidency to visit your sick mom because she had already passed away. And so these are like blatant lies that are out there. And I won't even go into the cause of them or why he's telling these stories the way they are. It actually reminds me of like my grandfather or grandmother up there trying to tell me a story or whatever. And as you get older, you start to conflate things in your mind and whatever. But it's like, these are just like, this didn't happen. And the activists and the journalists, it's like, they just don't take him to task on it, man. They don't call him out on it. Like, hey, Joe, that's strange. That's how that happened. This guy retired in 93. And that's the problem with a lot of this stuff. They just come out and tell whatever they want, and they're not being held accountable to anything. I know it's a totally different topic. I want to throw it back to Josh. He just threw something out there. CPI, highest level in 13 years.
Yeah, so let's harken it back to everybody remembers that 2008 economy. It's fantastic.
Hey,
Economy's
1%'s the new normal. Remember, 1% GDP. That is the new normal.
Hey, yeah, yeah. I mean, you just can't wave a magic wand and make it higher than that, can you? I don't think. I mean, no one's done that. What? No one's done that. Well, I mean, at least since January. I think the previous guy did it. I think he was above and beyond that. Anyway, yeah. So highest CPI in 13 years, it went from 0.2% over the course of a year. So that is not sustainable, even if you believe that the debt, the national matter, or if you think inflation doesn't, it's not sustainable. The economy can't sustain that. Like in our chat, we always go back and forth and we talk. I think it's the reset is coming. The hard reset is coming. I think Luke was spot on. This is just the very, very tip of the iceberg. We are starting to see the consequences from last year, with everything shutting down. And, and again, I go back to our supply chain. Companies and businesses can't keep up with the demand right now. We reopen the economy and we badly, and they can't keep up with the demand right now because they are short. Because chain can't handle it. Again, the supply chain is dog shit. It's fragile. You take a computer. Huge right now. They're in cars. They're in so many things that we buy and manufactured goods, and they're incredibly short supply. I mean, Chick-fil-A, the Lord's Chicken, is now regular because they don't have enough. They could Lord's Chicken. We're regulating Chick-fil-A sauce, people. That's where we're at. Cats and dogs, fire. It's out of control. But if we go back and forth, I can't remember. I've checked the game tape on, where Roger said it was the national deficit that doesn't matter or inflation doesn't matter. I don't know. It's hard to.
You should actually go back and check the game tape.
I think it was debt, right?
What I said was there are many people on the left who have believed for years that the national debt does not matter.
Absolutely. Man, don't go all Mitt Romney on us. Don't go.
No, I didn't go Mitt Romney. That just shows how much you listen. I will bet you a bottle of booze. I said there are many on the left. Well, one, clearly inflation does matter. And one of the problems that they're having right now is there's too much money in the market, right? Or in the economy. And I tried to read an article the other day in extremely technical, so I didn't fully comprehend it, but they're actually having problems with the central banks where there's too much money because of all the stimulus money and they can't move it. Because and they get into like their assets and debts and I don't quite grasp all that.
Dude, you look at it now. They used car prices are over $25,000 for the first time ever. A used car over 25 first time ever.
It's funny. You mentioned that, Roger, because I was just reading an article and I'm like, good Lord. In the city of Lubbock, Texas, they're getting $116 million of COVID aid, and they didn't ask for it. They're going to take it. I think they shouldn't take it, but one, they didn't ask for it. Two, they're going to get it. Three, they don't have any idea how they're going to use it. And it's like, well, they can't why are we doing this?
A lot of these places, like when you look at California's going to have like a $72 billion surplus this year. And they're going to get the COVID stimulus money. And the problem with that is, as opposed to taking that money and saying, hey, when you talk about like infrastructure, hey, let's go back and take a look at our dams. Let's go back and take a look at our reservoirs. Let's go back and do some forest clearing, right? We talked about this a couple of times where I think it was, maybe 3 years ago now where California actually had enough rain to pull it out of the drought. But because of all the EPA regulations over the last 25, 30 years, Republican and Democrat, they couldn't go build any new reservoirs. They couldn't clean out the ones that they had now, right? That all that rainwater just ran back into the ocean. And the problem is, and this goes right back to the Barry years with the economy, you're going to get all of that money, but it's not going to go to productivity. It's not going to go to any actions that's going to produce new jobs, right? And that's the problem with quantitative easing. So you have quantitative easing where the money, the federal government's going to basically inject capital into the economy. And the hopes of that is like, put it this way, it's like getting a small business loan. hey, as a bank, I'm going to give you a small business loan because I want your business to be successful. And I understand the first couple of years you're going to struggle, but you're going to be successful. You're going to hire folks. You're going to grow. And then as you grow, you're going to be able to pay the loan back and you're going to hire more people and yada, 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 right? So you're putting back into the economy. Well, the problem with places like California is you're going to get all this money and that money is going to go straight to building homeless camps in San Francisco. Okay, that money is going to go straight back into welfare programs that have operated at a deficit over the last 10 years. That money is going to go straight into places like Sacramento that tried to file bankruptcy. That money is going to go straight into pensions that were defaulted on. It's not going to go into anything that's going to continue to produce. And that's the bigger problem with that. So now you have all this money and it just sits there. And for all you folks that think, I read this the other day and I didn't even chime in on, I think it was Josh's post. I didn't even want to chime in on it because I just didn't have the energy to go down this road. So anybody who believes, and I know the right claims this as well, Newt Gingrich is his claim to fame. Anybody who believes that Bill Clinton balanced the budget, you need to go back and check the game tape. Okay. I know he claims it. I know Newt Gingrich claims it, but anybody who claims that, go back and look at the numbers. Okay. It never happened. It's a movement. It is a shift of funds from public to private debt. Okay. That's what they did. That's what happened. So on the surface, it looks, hey, we balanced the budget. No, you actually didn't, because on the private side here, you actually increased it. And if we balanced the budget, then how come the deficit, the national debt went up? Went up every year. I haven't checked in the last year to see if they changed it, right? Because I know the White House has been manipulating. They've been manipulating transcripts. They've been going back to like Biden's gas and changing the transcripts of what he said. But I know I jump around a little bit. But no, I totally agree with Josh. I mean, inflation is here. There's too much money in the economy. All of those, as Josh was saying, all those stimmy checks that are coming out. Hey, man, that stuff costs. The national debt, we do actually need to do an episode on like the national debt and kind of get to the bottom of that. I mean, it obviously makes a difference. Inflation is huge, but going back to Luke's point, you've got a majority of the workforce. They did an anonymous poll, and I think that it was like 72% of the people were willing to sit at home and not go back to work.
Yeah,
dude, it's incredible.
Dude, I got to give you. Well, okay, I'm gonna bag on myself and give you some credit where credit's due. I have a tendency, and it leads me to think within my own bubble, and I apply my own thought onto other people. And I'm like, surely they can't think that way because I think this way. And when we were locked down pretty tight at home when this thing first started, and it's like you couldn't leave your house. I mean, there were patrols and stuff, police, and you couldn't even leave your house for a few weeks there. And I was like, and Roger was saying it real early on. It's like, man, people, they're getting used to this. They don't want to go back to work. And I was like, no, they do want to go back to work. And the reason I was saying that is because, man, I want to go back to work. It's like, even if I could do everything from home, I need some sort of place to go do my work. Roger is in a little bit different situation where he can work from home and he's kind of set up his little out, what he does. But, I don't think I could probably get there, especially if I had my own business and everything. But man, if I have a job, I want to go to that job in the morning and I want to come home in the afternoon and, maybe take a half day every once in a while, whatever. But I have to have that routine. So I was thinking, no, Roger, yeah, I'm sure there are some people that don't want to go back to work. But dude, you are absolutely right. And not for everybody. But what I'm seeing firsthand is that not only do people not want to go back to work, they want their workload to be the same as it was at the height of the lockdown, which is minimal.
Yep.
Customer service is taking a dump. Everything, I mean, it's awful. And people, it's like you can't reach somebody on the phone. It's, as a general rule, especially in centers of I'm not going to go down that road. But so you're starting to see, there's stories coming out, the McDonald's putting up, sorry, the service is slow. People don't want to work anymore. And then, you're seeing employees walk out of like Wendy's and they can't even open because they're like, shoot, man, I'm being paid not to work. $16 an hour is what it averages out to right now. $16 an hour to not work. Man, this, I'm going to use Josh's words, it's not sustainable. Not only do people not want to go back to work, they don't want to work at all. There's been a marked change in American society. And it's not just American society. You're seeing it everywhere. There was a lockdown and a lull in the work. We're going to have to ease these people back into working like they did in 2019. It's just,
Not going to happen
it's
anytime soon.
I know it's breathtaking to
gonna
see. It's just breathtaking to see. And man, you were right on that one. You called that. But I want to address one thing and see what Josh has to say about it. So I think it was maybe 2-3 weeks ago, a bunch of retired French generals sent Macron an open letter warning of civil war. They were saying, we're having a clash of cultures here, and if something's not done about this, there will be civil war. And there are different definitions of civil war, but there's going to be serious conflict that's going to disrupt government. And I've read the letter translated, and it was a well put together letter. Let's consider the source French generals, but they did have some good points. Now, recently, I think yesterday or the day before, a group of 120 retired flag officers, part of a group called Generals for America #4, wrote an open letter basically to the public. And I think the name that stuck out to me was General Boykin, retired. All these flag officers are retired from all 4 services. And I'd encourage you to go look this letter up, and maybe Josh can cover certain parts of it if he wants to. But one of the bottom point, they stopping the Keystone Pipeline is bad for our strategic footing and all this stuff. Using the military as political pawns during the inauguration is bad. Rule of law. These people are obviously, I wouldn't say pro-Trump, but they were pro-Trump. The letter certainly looks like they're pro-Trump policies. But the last one is what really got me. And I'll read it word for word. The mental and physical condition of the commander-in-chief cannot be ignored. He must be able to quickly make accurate national security decisions involving life, limb, anywhere, day or night. Recent Democrat leadership's inquiries about nuclear code procedures sends a dangerous national security signal to nuclear-armed adversaries, raising questions about who's in charge. We must always have an unquestionable chain of command. This is getting zero media coverage when all the retired officers, a lot of them not generals, wrote an open letter denouncing Trump. Man, that was just all over the news for days. This is getting nothing. I'm sure that's some kind of political action committee, Generals for America or whatever, but it is significant that there's that many flag officers that are willing to put their names, and each and every one of their names is right on there, put their names on something like that. I think that's significant. I really do, in society and just where we stand right now. Josh, what do you think?
I agree. And when you sent me that and I read that letter, the last points really stood out. But I think the one that stood out more than that one for me anyway was when they talked about the politicization of the military. Anybody who's read one Wikipedia page on Rome, you understand why Rome fell. One of the things that happened, its downfall was when they politicized the legions. Once that happened, and when we start talking, there absolutely has to be an unquestioned, very clear chain of command, and we don't have that right now. And even Rich Grinnell came out yesterday and said that Susan Rice is the shadow governor for domestic policy right now. Like basically shit. Biden's not running it. Kamala's not running it. But it's Susan Rice. And, we've talked about it. We talked about, Blinken's running, foreign policy. He's making the decisions. He's adjudicating everything himself. It's not even making it to the president. But when you start politicizing the military, when we saw all of those generals and again, the media, touted that. They were like, this is amazing. This, all these, look at all these patriots who, no trouble when they see it, has gotten, zero media coverage. Boykin was on there. I was kind of surprised to see Boykin on there. Honestly, some of the things that I've read and stuff. He did. I mean, he did write a pretty good book, "The Mission, the Men, and Me," which was required reading. But it's not this entire thing is not good. We don't have a clear chain of command. We do not have a clear president. Anybody who thinks Biden is running policy, you're not paying attention. You're a fool, and this is not going to lead anywhere good. I mean, dude, somebody either needs to 25th Amendment him, get him out of there, or somebody needs to grab a hold of the wheel of the ship and keep that thing, on an even keel until 2024, at least 2022, where you can put some stopgaps in place, either with that. But right now, this is a rudderless ship, and it's not going anywhere at all.
And that's scary, right? I don't mind having like a shadow president. It's like, because at first I think we all thought Kamala Harris was going to be running the show. At least I did. I was like, you know what? This thing, he said he's going to be a transitional president. It's going to be her agenda. She's going to be running the show. And maybe she is. It doesn't seem like it, at least publicly in what we see. But at least then you have a president, shadow president, whatever. Somebody's running the country. But like we mentioned a couple weeks ago, or a couple episodes ago, more and more and more, it seems like, well, hey, every department head, or maybe just the top, 2 or 3 key people, they're just kind of running and doing what hey, Blinken, you do whatever you think you need to do, right? Susan Rice, you do whatever you think's best. Because I think with even some of the stuff that's coming out, and I get it, you have to cater to some of your base and even farther left to some more of the progressives, but even some of this stuff is outside of what I think is the norm for, Joe Biden, what he's done in the last half a century in the U.S. government. That is a long time. But yeah, it just makes you wonder. It's like, hey, who is running this? And I don't think anybody is running the show. And that's the scary part. At least if like Kamala was running it, because I fully expected to see a lot of Harris on TV, maybe even her giving some more speeches. Dude, I think I've seen her by his side a couple of times when he comes out to do his thing and, answer a couple of questions. She's kind of standing off to the side and they walk off. That's it. I mean, I don't even know what she's doing, and when we talk about the foreign policy thing, I mean, this is, I know we don't have a whole lot of time left, but, look what's going on right now with Israel. And I forget, was it Josh or Luke that posted one of the news articles where it's like they were literally sympathizing with the Hamas? Yeah, it was Josh. It's like, wow. It's like, hey, go pick up a couple books. Go read a couple of news articles. I might sympathize a little bit more with the 6-year-old who died with when the Iron Dome missed one of the rockets or whatever. And I get it. There are bigger issues over there. It's more than just right and wrong, good and bad, or whatever. But hey, I'm not so much of a Hamas sympathizer. That's it. That's just my takeaway. And I think that when you look at that, when you look at the attack on Colonial Pipeline, where it's kind of funny because it's a lot, the timeline is sped up a little bit from what the coronavirus was, where at first it was like, it's just a criminal actor, it's not state. And now you're already starting to hear the state sponsor, you know what? This is coming out of it's coming out of Russia. This is coming out of former Soviet Union. So, I mean, Luke, what do you think the next test is? I mean, I think it's clearly, you're starting to see more. So I'm going to go ahead and make an assumption. Okay. I'm going to make an assumption that you're going to find some state sponsor, maybe not direct because just how they operate, but ties with what happened with the Colonial Pipeline. So what's the next foreign policy test for the Biden administration?
That's a good question, man. That's a really good question. I think the big test, it's hard to say, man. I think it could have something to do with Turkey. I'm not sure. Maybe I'll talk through one of your points first, and maybe it'll come to me. Maybe a Luke Stradamus will come out. But Look, I'm really trying not to have Biden derangement syndrome, like people had Trump derangement syndrome. I'm trying to look at this stuff from an objective eye, with an objective eye. Biden's been in office for 4 months. Tying the what happened with Colonial to him. Now the response maybe, his response maybe you tie that to him, but that might have happened under Trump. Same thing, right? Uh, so I'm trying to be objective. This inflation. How would it be different if Trump was in? Would he have poured flames on the inflation? Poured fuel on the inflation flames by doing this stimulus? Maybe. I don't know. But here's one thing I am absolutely sure of. And I would love to hear somebody argue this with me. It's like, man, the last few months of Trump's presidency, I thought were brilliant with respect to foreign relations and foreign policy, particularly with respect to the Abraham Accords. It was what they accomplished. I know it took them the whole term to accomplish that. There was a lot of work behind the scenes that went into those Abraham Accords, historic deals between Israel and a number of different countries that wouldn't have happened under a different administration. I can tell you 100%. I am 100% confident that what's going on in Israel right now, which is gonna turn in, that's gonna be the next challenge, is the widening of that conflict. I think, but that wouldn't happen under Trump. He wouldn't have allowed it to happen. He was too proud of his Abraham Accords to let that happen. So that one I'm going to put directly on Biden. Um, Even though he's saying, he's still saying Israel has a right to defend itself. Man, yeah, that sure. But I'm telling you, they wouldn't have gone down that road. All those people, those Palestinians in that 13-story building that Israel bombed in retaliation would still be alive. Well, a lot of them would still be alive because that building wouldn't have fallen because none of these rockets wouldn't have taken off. So, yeah, I'm going to say there's going to be probably a widening of the Israel right now. Um, it's hard to say what the next big test is going to be. I'm going to say it's going to be domestic, not necessarily foreign. But you know what? Was it Josh or Roger that brought it up? Josh said that Susan Rice is Rick Grinnell said that Susan Rice is running the show, and Rick Grinnell made a really good point that if you look at foreign policy, all Susan Rice knows is domestic policy. And if you look at foreign policy, it's being run like domestic policy. And that kind of explains, to bring it around to what we were talking about kind of at the beginning, was the interim national security guidance, where it's like, yeah, this kind of looks like domestic type issues. Yeah. And I was like, wow, that does make sense. Maybe Susan Rice is running the show. I still think Blinken has a lot to say about it. But two names you don't hear a lot of are Susan Rice. You heard a lot more from her under the Obama administration, but you're not hearing anything from her now. And another name you never hear is Ron Klain. He's the chief of staff. Usually, the chief of staff, their names being all over the place. I hadn't heard Ron Klain's name at all.
He
It's
did
like,
come out last week and say that he expected Joe Biden to run for another term.
oh, geez.
And he
Well,
also said, do not underestimate Trump running again.
well, if I was running the show, if I was the one running the show behind the scenes, I would want the guy letting me run the show to run for president too. But I don't know. Yeah, so that was a good one. I mean, I want to transition to this real quick. So I I I personally would prefer to see Trump not run again. At this point, right now, as of this airing of the podcast, or this recording of the podcast, I would prefer Trump not to run. Don't right now. I would prefer DeSantis to run with Rick Grinnell or somebody like that as his vice president. We'll see, but what do you? I mean, Josh, I think we've had that conversation before, but the DeSantis thing could change. But I would rather Trump not run again.
I agree. I don't think again, I didn't agree with everything Donald Trump did, but I agree with a lot of the stuff that he did. I would not want to see him run again. I want him to get behind, a DeSantis Grinnell, to get a DeSantis Nome I think that would be a strong ticket as well. Or, and I don't even know. So when I was in Florida, there was a local news station, and they were kind of chatting on the radio, and they actually talked about it. They had reporters. It's one of the inner circles of DeSantis's that he had actually friends with Nikki Haley, and you know, I got my issues, especially the way she acted this past February. But look at DeSantis, he's done everything right. I mean, even when he got taken to task, where a lot of people have capitulated, he's he's run the state. Very few issues. It's driven a lot of people crazy because he hasn't gone full draconian. And we've already talked about, the numbers are the same, almost the same as California, New York, where, everything was draconian, where they're arresting people, out on paddle boards out in the middle of the ocean by themselves. So, I'm a big fan of DeSantis, for sure. Yeah, I think we can't take our eye off of Europe and what's going on. And Luke, you know it better than most. Simply being there. But dude, that big migrant pickup. That you talked about it on previous episodes about that's obviously a large indicator, and that's not helping France and the class warfare they got going on and the overall migrant problem in Europe writ large that they're having. I don't know what's going to happen over there with the migrant issue. What was it? It was like 1,200 or something migrants that Italy had to
Revise the number up. They revised the number up. It was 1,200, and then it went up. It jumped to 2,000 in one day, and that was just at one location.
Holy smokes! Again, that's something else that's not sustainable. I'm actually shocked that we have not seen another migrant caravan coming from Central America. Going back to that, dude. I'm talking about. But here's the thing, dude. It was on TV every night, about these poor people, making that long, arduous march, in the desert. You ever heard anything, man? You ever heard anything? There could be one.
It's here. My wife walked in. My wife walked in the other day, and they were showing it on Fox News down right there at the border, and they showed hundreds of people coming over the hill. She's like, "What's this?" I'm like, "Oh, this is on the border, and it's the shallowest part of the river." And so all these people come over. And what's funny is, so they're videoing the coyote bringing them over, and they are already broken up into groups. They're like, "Oh yeah, we're the Venezuelans, we're the Hondurans," and so you have all these hundreds of people come over, and they played it for probably like 10 minutes, so you kind of get this grasp, and then finally, like one CBP guy comes out. He's like, "Bienvenidos." They all come up and they break into their little groups, and yeah, dude, it's I think the difference is like where Trump, where you had this mass caravan because you were just going to try to flood one particular part of the gate. Well, now everything's open, so you just kind of it's just not even a slow trickle. It's just you let the faucet on. It's just running. I do want to ask you one question there, Josh, talking about DeSantis and 2024 candidates, because here's my issue. I'm going off history and what previous candidates have done when they become presidents, whether it be Republicans or Democrats. I love Trump's policies, and he stuck to what he campaigned on for the most part. Not everything works out the way that you planned. I get it. It's a campaign and this and that. But I tell you what, everything he damn said he was going to try to do, he tried to do. And a lot of it got accomplished. Whereas you see a lot of Republicans, they come in gung-ho, I'm going to protect your Second Amendment. I'm going to be a fiscal conservative, and I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And they come in, it's like, yeah, you kind of didn't do any of that. So I guess my question is, do you think that changes the characteristics and the mentality of the 2024 candidates, where they're going to be more like, "Hey, man, this is the platform I'm running on, and then if they get elected, I'm actually going to implement these"? Or do you think it goes back to the way the old GOP used to be, where, "Hey, I'm going to just kind of spew whatever I need to say to get elected, and then when I come in, I'm going to capitulate and move farther to the left"?
I think it depends on the candidate. I think if you get, you take a look at the usual, you take a look at, the Mitt Romneys, the Jebs. I would even say, Ted Cruz. In certain aspects, those guys are always going to say whatever they need to say to get elected, and they're just going to do whatever they're going to do. Um, I can't think of any in Congress right now that is not like that. I can't think of the first one that given
Rand
maybe
Paul.
I was about to say, yeah, Rand Paul, he's probably the exception. But everybody else, dude, they're going to say whatever they need to say to get elected, and they're going to do whatever they're going to do. You go back and you look at what he was going to do when he made his run for governor against that crackhead Gillum. Um, he he has done or tried to do everything that he campaigned on. He's the good thing about DeSantis though is that he signed some bills that have even upset some of the conservatives a little bit, but not enough to I'm not gonna vote for him. But it's say, hey man, I had to give a little bit of this to get a little bit of that. But it wasn't something that was so egregious that you could in the Mitch McConnell, Nancy Pelosi category. Um, he's pretty much held his promises to he stayed on task with those. So I don't know,
You know
man. We'll
what's
see.
scary though? Look at how close that vote was between him and Gillum.
Oh yeah, it was
Right?
it was
Look at
crazy
how
close.
close that election was. And it makes me wonder, because I don't know any Democrats down in Florida because my mother-in-law is up here with me now, but it makes me wonder with the Democrats down in Florida if they actually look and say, wow, we're in pretty good shape. And man, I'm glad Gillum didn't win.
Yeah, I don't know, man. What scares me about Florida is one, how close that race was, but what really scares me about Florida is that come 2024, but really 2028, man, dude, all the Marriott boat lift. You're talking about all the old elderly Cubans right now who were like, no, man, it's like under communism. Like I know I've lived in Cuba under Castro. They're aging out, man. They are aging out. And, I've got friends who, their grandparents came over chug rafts from Cuba, and here they are. They sit today. They are fans of more government. They are fans of less freedoms. They are fans of abolishing the Second Amendment. They are fans because dude, that younger generation, they've lost it. They don't care, man. That older generation that knows they're going to be gone, and man, so it's gonna it's gonna be questioned, but it's gonna be a toss up. I think down the road.
Well, keep a close eye on House Resolution 1, the For the People Act. And, I read through almost the entire thing, and I was shocked. If you look at the 2020 election, it was really the perfect storm for a Democrat. Even if you believe everything was on the up and up, it was a perfect storm for a Democrat, and specifically against Trump. And there were certain, allowances that were made and certain parts of the Constitution that were violated, specifically in Pennsylvania. And what they're trying to do with this For the People Act is normalize those perfect storm events to where that's just the way things are run from now on. There's some pretty shocking things in HR one. I encourage everyone to go out and take a look on it, take a look at it. One of the things I want to touch on real quick is old Jen Psaki's at it again. There was a story that was put out that the White House press secretary put out guidance to the White House press corps that any time that they get a quote from a staffer within the White House, so if a reporter goes to a staffer like they normally do, this is a normal thing. They'll go to a staffer and they'll ask them for, hey, could you clarify what the press secretary said? So the staffer, that's their job, is to answer that question. And that is taken as, delegation from the press secretary to go ahead and publish that. Well, new guidance has been put out by the White House press secretary that says all staffer quotes have to be approved by the White House before publishing.
Whatever.
Now that's guidance they put out. Now they don't have to follow that, but they said, "Hey, follow this." Now you can talk all you want about Trump and Jim Acosta and all that stuff, and Trump was limiting press freedoms, which is one of my pet peeves right now is when people say that. But dude, nothing like this came out. Where now White House staffers, whose job it is to clarify things, any quotes have to be approved by by the White House prior to publishing. It's unbelievable, man. That's propaganda 101. That's what it's all about. Centralized control over the message. I don't whatever. So I'm gonna kick it to Roger afterwards for his final thoughts. Talk about this website. Well, our loyal listener Scott, back in June or May of last year, maybe it was June, secured the rights for Culper's CanteenCup.com. And I think he's willing to work with us on securing that name. That's one that I mean, it's pretty straightforward. Culper's CanteenCup.com. So well played, Scott, and we will definitely be talking to you about that. It's pretty much all I have. I mean, there's so much more to talk about, and we're going to try to work on getting on a more regular schedule. But yeah, it's been tough lately. We've all three got a lot going on, and we're not locked down anymore, so we're having to juggle each other's schedules, and I think we work together pretty well. So thanks, Roger and Josh, for working with my schedule, and I'll kick it to Roger with that.
Well, one, I'm not sure you want to give Scott the return on investment that he made. He was betting on Culper's Canteen Cup last year. That was hopefully you can write that one off on your taxes. So good luck. But no, good call. Definitely want to reach out to him. A couple of things we didn't cover that I do want to get into maybe in a future episode. New news on Hunter Biden, right? And the Chinese spy that he was either shacked up with or living with or associated with, who, oh, by the way, offered political opposition information. Now, I'm pretty sure this was brought up during a previous president, right? And there was like a whole lot of rhetoric around it and this and that. So I definitely want to dive into that a little bit more. And for the folks that are out there listening or watching, just gurgle that a little bit. Josh, you might know more about this, but big 2A case going up to the Supreme Court, right? Isn't it New York with like handgun carry, where they're talking about it could actually change the laws of the land, where it's going to be shall issue, or will issue versus, can issue or whatever. And then finally, on my last note, for all you folks on the East Coast, all right, I'm tired of hearing about your bitching about gas and this and that, because I choose to side with the Department of Energy Secretary, because if you had electric cars, you wouldn't have any gas problems right now. So just take her advice, go out there and buy yourself a Prius or Tesla or whatever, and you can skip the fuel lines. So with that, we'll throw it to Josh and let him take us home.
But if I buy a Tesla, then I'm giving money to Elon Musk, and the left hates. So I don't.
Hey, did you see what he just did to Bitcoin?
Yes, dude. He put Bitcoin in the garbage. Dude, I love it. I love it so much.
You don't give up.
No. In case going forward, part of that is, do you have the right to possess a weapon outside of your home? Basically, do you have a right to carry? Heller v. DC kind of defined the right that you do have a right, individual right to, have a weapon in your home for self-defense. Now, that New York case, that's going to be, do you have a right to take it out of your home? Where does that home extend to? And that it's, and Luke, I did too, man. Scalia he was probably one of the best judges to sit on the Supreme Court. The Constitution doesn't say what it doesn't say. So anyway, yeah, we'll definitely be watching that one. We'll get into that one. Yeah. So we had another loyal listener, and we should have done shout outs at the beginning of the episode, not the end. But so Tyler hit me up. I don't know if you guys remember Tyler. that name floating around a few times. So Tyler hit me up. He's interested in the website, and Tyler, man, we may come a call in. Tyler has offered the monetary support for our website. Uh, you know, so there's that. So we got some people interested in it. Scott was he played his hand early. Man, the house always wins, Scott. That's all I can say. I think you're taking an L on this one. Hey, real quick, the last thing before we close it out. So just reading the news article, a Hummer in Citrus County, Florida. I love Citrus County. Caught on fire and burned to the ground. Luckily, no one was injured because they had 20 gallons of fuel in a thing that wasn't meant to carry fuel in, and so the picture is great, man. It's burned. I mean, it's burned. It is a smoking hulk on the side of the road. If you're gonna put fuel in external things besides your car's gas tank, don't use milk jugs, and please God, do not use plastic bags. Just don't do it. It's not going to end well. Or maybe you should. We'll just let Darwin just go ahead and take care of those of you who COVID did not. So with that, that's going to wrap us up for this episode. Hey, stick around for YouTube for your freemium content. And now,
Dude, the stuff with the trash bags and come on, man.
I wonder. There's so many pictures. I actually found one that I was like, come on, that's not. And I went down the rabbit hole, and the picture was taken like 10 years ago. Because I looked.
But it was
taken
back
10
then,
years
too.
ago. It's stupid, and I'm sure that's being done a lot. But yeah, boy, hey, you guys probably didn't notice. I didn't say a single cuss word.
Yeah.
Roger had one or two, and Josh had one
everybody
or
look
two.
at Luke. Everybody look at Luke. He didn't
I
curse.
had to make a conscious effort not to do it. Oh,
yeah,
Good job, Luke.
yeah,
So-
man.
no, I'm trying not to, man.
Don't.
Trying not to. Because, dude, I'm
the
telling
gas
you,
and
if
the milk thing.
okay. Yeah.
Gonna say
Paper
the
cup,
gas
the
and the milk
styrofoam cup, that's not going to last long.
I used to put gas in milk tanks as a kid. Like I get that, but dude,
Well, you know what?
Yeah,
like
and-
when I do like my mix with the oil and gas, I'll do that in a milk jug. I don't give a shit. It's in my garage.
yeah,
Been working for me for 45 years.
yeah, the
Well-
grocery bag though.
Hey, are they still okay? So if you buy a gas canister at wherever, Home Depot or wherever, with a nozzle on it, do they still have that stupid government? Oh my God!
Oh, it's worse.
Anybody who thinks that the government can do something efficiently, look no further than that nozzle. That's the dumbest thing
Yeah.
I've ever seen.
I do money to find an old school nozzle to put on my gas cans these days. I got to where
You know what I bought
nozzle
off
off.
Amazon? Good.
What's that? No, dude. So
No, I was
take
gonna
the
say what
nozzle
I buy the racing
Somebody
gas
go
cans
ahead.
off Amazon. I got those big ass racing gas cans or whatever. Like they're not big; they're like 5 gallons or whatever. But they just come with a straight nozzle because they use them for like race cars and stuff like that. But they're like $19. That's the best way to
Yeah,
go.
the
'Cause
one
that I
The
bought.
one's rough.
Yeah, the ones that I just bought. I bought one, and it's got the weird little nozzle where you like press down. Well, the problem with the gas can is the handle's on top.
Yeah.
So I'm like, so how do I pick this thing up and tilt it and push the button? Like you can't physically do it. It's a 2-person job.
The gas cans that Roger buys keeps his fuel warm for like 5 hours.
degrees.
It's battery
Yeah.
operated. You don't even need to spark it. You just fire it up. So
Are-
hey, for this week's for this week's episode. That's going to do it for us. Again, we want to thank all the folks out there on YouTube that watch us. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Pass it on. We need people to share, right? We need people to share the episode.
Yeah, share
Either
it.
share the YouTube, share the podcast, share whatever with your friends.
Don't be scared. Don't be scared.
Yeah, don't be scared. We're still looking for that liberal to bring on here, but and definitely for the YouTube viewers out there, go gurgle Carlton Zeus. Check him out on www.carltonzeus.com because we know you don't hear his intro music. And until next time, keep your canteen cups tightly secured.